This is part 5 of this series on what Mayor Baba really taught. And I'm Chris Ott. And I just barely covered the first concept that I wanted to cover, which was um, that Baba teaches that not that there is a God, like in monotheism, um, but there's one God, but rather there is only God. So you could say there's only one God, but that implies the idea of gods, because that's where it extends from. Monotheism comes from polytheism, and the only um, uh, change was to say, there's only one of these gods, and all the others are either demigods, minor gods, or deities, and there's this important God, or to say that they don't exist at all, and there's only one God. So that was like the elimination of all but one God. But that, and meaning like a God, like with a small g. But Baba's teaching is different. And it's, so if you had to give a name to what Baba is describing, it wouldn't be monotheism, which is that there's one God, but more like theistic monism. There's only God. Okay, so I think that's clear enough. Now, briefly, too, there is in almost all religions, I think, the idea of a soul, that people have a soul. Um, and, and some teach that people have souls and animals don't have souls, and the soul is kind of like a gift from God, when God is separate in that idea. Baba has a very totally different teaching about soul. And this is really related to how Baba is different on a lot of things. So I'm just going to have to cover this briefly. Maybe I'll get more into it later. But because Baba teaches reincarnation, but this is reincarnation in a very special sense. Because the normal definition of reincarnation is transmigration of the soul. So we got to know, well, what does Baba teach about the soul? Okay, as I said, all religions, as far as I know, teach that people have a soul. But Baba teaches that there really is only one soul. And you could give it the name, with a capital S, the soul. And this soul is God. It's the same thing. But why we have two different words? It just helps with the language of describing everything. So when I refer to my soul, it's kind of a misnomer because there's really only this one soul. And it's called, that's what's Paramatma. Paramatma means supreme soul. Even Emerson borrowed from Hinduism this concept of supreme soul, and he called it the oversoul. And Baba adopted the word oversoul for the English version of what he means. But the oversoul is this one real soul. All individual souls are sort of, in a way, a kind of illusion that is experienced by the oversoul when it is influenced by what Baba calls sanskaras. And sanskaras are a big part of Baba's teaching. As a matter of fact, I'll be getting into them. But sanskaras are like lenses upon your perception. So these lenses build up over the course of many lifetimes, and then before that, evolution, and they produce change what the phenomena. But the phenomena is just a dream. And I'm going to go into this, how this could be. But I'm going to just barely touch on these points here. Baba said that all his teaching kind of comes down to just the sanskara. So if there's only God, and it's this one soul, we only have this one. It's not a thing, because it's not a discrete, separate from other things thing. We have God, and we have the sanskara, and if we say that God is in a sense, the perceiving, then there's the perceiving and how it perceives, and that's the sanskaras. And that's all there is. Everything is an outcome of in phenomena, which is very diverse. All of those diversities are created by the sanskaras. God is indivisible and doesn't have any diversity or plurality to it. But phenomena is full of plurality. There's many this and many of that, and they have many attributes. But all that's produced by the sanskaras. So you could say, like, if God is an eye over here, well, let's put it on the left, because I always do that. There's a big eye, and then you put all these lenses in front of that eye. It produces the phenomenal universe, but it doesn't affect the eye. Okay, so maybe I just did a terrible job explaining that, but it doesn't matter because I'm trying to get to something I've been trying to get to for a long time, and this is my the Parisian cafe story. And the reason I want to tell this Parisian cafe story is it's going to convey the sense in which Baba teaches that everything's an illusion. You see, a Hindu grows up being taught from childhood that the world is an illusion, but they couldn't say how that could be. And they would also chalk it up essentially to a religious or magical belief, that it's true in some magical way that you can't really understand. Some magical way, it's an illusion. But it doesn't have any rationality to it. There's no explanation. Baba actually gives an explanation. But I want to convey the sense in which the world's an illusion. So now, I'm going to do something nobody else would ever do, and I'll probably have to redo at least this video, if not all these videos, because it's going to quickly get kind of confusing. But hear me out. There is something in philosophy, all the way back to the very beginning of philosophy, meaning Plato and Aristotle and so forth, and even less so in the pre-Socratics. But they believed in what's called an external world. There's another world that we don't perceive that is somehow the cause of the phenomenal world that we do perceive. So when I say, so I reach out and I pick this up and I feel its coldness and I see the color and all these things of this cup. And I taste it. It has a smell and a taste, and it has a texture. And all of that is phenomena. Now, I'm going to explain why all philosophers, since the ancient philosophers, would say that what I was just describing is an illusion. By the way, even Aristotle, who was a materialist, and even materialists today believe this without really getting that they believe this. There is a problem in philosophy that goes all the way back to the beginning, and today it's called the mind-body problem. But it's really a two-world problem, a real world and an illusory world. Now let me explain what I mean by that. So let's imagine now, I'll either use pictures here or I won't, I'm not sure. But let me just go through this. So let's say I'm coming off the street in Paris and I'm on vacation, and I go into a cafe and I order a pastry, something that I see on the menu, and I have to point to it because I don't know French, and the waitress comes over, sees what I want, and then she returns, and I wait, and then the pastry comes, and now she leaves, and now I'm going to describe the phenomena that are examples of the phenomena I would have experience of in this cafe. As I reached for my fork, I would feel the coldness of the fork, and then as I lift the fork, I'd feel its weight as it pulled back toward the table very slightly. And then as I go to push it into the pastry, I feel some resistance from the pastry, okay? And then it kind of pops through, and then I lift a piece of pastry, and that has a little more weight than the fork. And now I feel my arm moving toward my face. And as the pastry piece reaches my face, I have an aroma, smell the aroma. And as I put it in my mouth, I don't just get the flavor, I get the texture, I get the sense of the movement of my mouth, I get the sense of it on my tongue, I get the sense of my mouth moving as I'm chewing, and then I get the sense and even the sound of my swallowing, and I hear that going down, and all these are sensations. Now, where are these sensations? Well, if we asked a scientist, like a neurologist, he would say, well, they're occurring in your brain. Your sensations are taking place in your brain. You don't have sensations over here. Oh, it's like I left my sensation in the car. Let me go get it. It's not something outside of yourself. It's in your brain. So that sense of smell is something that is produced in your brain. The sense of the sight of even the picture of the thing. It's not produced on the surface of your eyes. It's produced in your brain. Okay. So the entire experience. Now I might have emotions like happiness about the pastry and excitement, and then I might have thoughts about the fact that I'm in Paris and I don't want to miss my plane, and I'm upset that I didn't get a good price on the ticket, and I'm worried I might not get a cab. So I have anxiety and I have thoughts and I hear inner monologue. Where are they taking place? In my brain. Okay. So I see the waitress, she's across the room, and then she sees that I want the check, or however they do it in Paris. I've never been to France. She comes over. Now, where is that experience of her coming over? For me, it's in my brain, according to neurology. Now, in ancient times, they would say it was in your mind. So, okay. Then everything that I experienced, the whole pastry shop, the experience of going in, the waitress, the service, the thoughts that I had, everything happened in my brain. Well, something had to happen outside of my brain, right? I mean, wasn't there also another waitress that was a real waitress? And she came over and gave me a real pastry and so forth? Now, those questions have always traditionally been answered by saying yes. They were in the external world, the world outside of your experience. So you never experienced them. So they're not like a scientifically known thing, they're a theory. There's a theory that there has to be an external world that causes your internal world. Now, I really don't mean in and out of your brain at this point, because realize that, let's say I could have my eyes turned so that I can see the outside of my head. That would still be in my mind, wouldn't it? It would still be in my brain. So even talking about brains, they're still part of experience. So they're part of the internal world. So that's the sense in which we have an internal, illusory sort of copy of something out there that we can't directly perceive. Now, if that isn't clear, look up mind-body problem. It's not hard to understand. It's that you can't verify the existence of the actual world that's causing your personal experience. Anybody would concede that their personal experience, their dreams, their thoughts, are not physical things outside them. They're in them. Some people are what's called naive realists, but they're naive because they haven't fully understood the thing. Like, for instance, they'll go, no, there really is sound outside us. Well, there might be, but we don't know that because the sound that we experience is happening in our brain. The theory of physics is that there's vibrations out there that are interpreted by your brain as sound. But even that's a theory, because you can't perceive anything outside your perception. You're kind of locked in to your private, personal, illusory experience. I say illusory because it is. Now, even scientists will concede that it's an illusion. But now, they sometimes call the external world the outer causal object, okay? But they have all kinds of other words for it. the material world, the real world, all kinds of terms, but it's the same thing. It's this theoretical external world, or the outer world. And you'll find this all the way back, like I say, to Aristotle and Plato. They both had solutions to solve this problem long ago. Now, why is it a problem? Well, there's a whole bunch of problems. How do we know that our experience, the world of our experience in the pastry shop, is like the actual external one? Since we can't experience directly the external one, we only experience our internal experience. How can we compare our experience with its external cause? We can't, because we can only see our experience, so we can't compare it. Now, how do we know there is an external world? We can't know that because we can't perceive it. Now, how does this external world produce the internal world? We could never, ever know that even in principle, because since we can't see the external world, we couldn't possibly see how it's producing the internal experience. We can only come up with ideas, and those are just sort of fantasies based on projecting images from our internal experience into kind of like, make something up like it. But we don't know whether there really is such a thing in reality. This is admitted by all philosophers throughout history, and still is. David Chalmers has given like a TED talk on it. He's a philosopher, an American philosopher, and he's written an essay called "The Hard Problem." And this is the real hard problem. How can we? For him, the hard problem was, how does the outer world produce the internal world? We don't know, and we couldn't possibly answer that question because it's just a theoretical world. How can we answer questions about it when it's only a theory? I hope I made that clear. It's in my second book, Evolution of Perception, Re-Explained. It's really clear in there. So, the way we explain our internal experience, and the fact that if somebody else came into the cafe, they'd have their internal experience. But theirs would be roughly like mine. So it always seemed like a pretty good idea to explain the fact that we kind of have roughly the same experience of the inside of the cafe, that there must really be a cafe. And that external real world cafe, or the physical world. And so the way that's always been explained is by this external world theory. Always. Always. I mean, if there was, I should say that there were experiments which called idealism, which tried other ways, and none of them ever worked. They ended up, I'm not even going to get into what they ended up in. It's not important. We came back to the idea of the external world because those didn't work. Now, that's the deepest problem of philosophy. We can't go any further with this idea because it's only a theoretical other world, the real world. The real world is just a theoretical thing. So, Baba actually solves this problem not by postulating a second world, but by giving a process that explains our experience. How do you have your experience and I have my experience, and they're roughly the same cafe if we go in there? Baba explains this in terms of a process of evolving consciousness, an evolving perception. And it's the sanskaras over time that build the experience. And when you're done, it's like we find it. So because he replaced external world with a process of evolving experience, he solves the mind-body problem. And he's the first to ever do so, because when you understand that the mind-body problem is a two-world problem, really, then you see that no one ever really got outside of it. Even a guy named George Berkeley, who thought he had solved the problem, he didn't. And I'll go into that in my book. Okay, that's all I had to say here. So, when Baba solves it this way, now we see what we mean. We already conceded that experience is illusory. But we thought there was something else. But Baba says, no, there isn't anything else. That's all there is of the phenomenal world. But he's able to account for all the facts about the phenomenal world and the fact that you have your experience and I have mine in terms of an evolution of sanskaras. Now that is the huge philosophically in Baba. That is a game changer. This is solving the 2,500-year-old central problem of philosophy. Every philosopher has tried to solve this problem and has failed. And Baba doesn't even have the problem. It's not because he's an idealist. I'm going to go into why idealists still have the problem. Because they still have an archetype and a copy. The closest that ever came to what Baba taught was Kant, but he failed. But he got closer because he had this idea, what he called intuitions, were kind of like the sanskars. They were like lenses forming what you see. But he still had, we're all separate and all this, so it didn't really make any sense. And he ends it up in a thing called solipsism, just like every other attempted form to escape the materialist idea of the external world. And he frankly did have an external world, which he called the noumenal world, which he said you couldn't know anything about. And we were in exactly the same problem. Okay. I might have done a bad job explaining this, and if so, I'll redo it. But that's the best I can do right now. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. See you next time.